For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. He who has his commandments and keeps them is the one who loves him, and he who loves him will be loved by God.
And frankly, if I lived right now in the Pacific Northwest, I'd be considering moving. Seriously. The gist of it is this. The federal government estimates 13,000 Americans will die in a major earthquake and tsunami in the Pacific Northwest. It's not a question of whether, but when. This earthquake is coming, and it's overdue. Consider that the magnitude 9.0 earthquake in Japan just a few years ago, remember that? Killed more than 15,000 people in the north of Japan and injured thousands of others. Seismologists say that the quake that will strike on our Pacific Northwest coastline should be even stronger, at up to a 9.2. They call such a quake a margin rupture quake, and it's every bit as bad as it sounds. Here's the reason for it. Our entire continent sits on the North American tectonic shelf, right? Plate, I should say. Off the coast of the Pacific Northwest, from the top of Washington State all the way down to northern California. This is it. And another plate called the Juan de Fuca is trying to slide up under North America, but it's stuck. We have an illustration over here in the big wall. Let me show you what this is. This is our continent here. This is the Cascadia Mountains. This is the Cascadia, what do they call it? The Cascadia what? Bridge. The Cascadia Bridge. I was actually asking him, but thank you. The North American plate here and the Juan de Fuca plate here. This one's sliding up under, and eventually this is going to go down, send a huge wall of water up. That wall will go all the way over to Japan, and the other will come onto our shore within 15 minutes. And when it slips, it will unleash not only a colossal earthquake, but also that tsunami, 700 miles long, and in some places up to a 100-foot high wall of water and whatever it's pushing, like houses and dump trucks and schools. Thousands and thousands will not escape. The New Yorker quotes a FEMA official who says, and I quote, "Our operating assumption is that everything west of Interstate 5 will be toast." Everything west of Interstate 5 is gone. That's Seattle, Tacoma, Portland and Olympia, Salem and Eugene, wiped out. Altogether about 7 million people. That's not including tourists. So think of summertime. The New Yorker reports that FEMA calculations indicate the disaster will damage or destroy about 1 million buildings, including 3,000 schools and 1/3 of all fire stations. And perhaps the worst part of all of this, these sorts of earthquakes happen at regular intervals in exactly this part of the world, have forever. On average, according to seismologists, about every 240 years. So when was the last one of these massive 9.2 or so earthquakes? Well, the last one was more than 300 years ago, the year 1700. It struck in the Pacific Northwest and sent a 600-foot wave of water all the way to Japan. So right now, on average, the Pacific Northwest is decades overdue for the really, really big one. Michio Kaku is a physicist and professor at City College of New York. This article is stunning. Is it overstated in any way?
No, the Cascadia Fault is an earthquake waiting to happen. We know it's going to happen with an energy 30 times the maximum energy of the San Andreas Fault. So Hollywood has us brainwashed into thinking the big one is going to be in California. No, the Cascadia Fault would pack energy 30 times the energy that the San Andreas Fault can muster.
The article speaks of a liquefaction of the Earth, that part of the Earth will turn to liquid.
That's right. We're talking about major energy surges inside the ground that'll cause it to liquefy. We've seen that in Japan. We saw that at Fukushima, and it's almost like quicksand. One day you're walking on solid ground, the next you're falling right into a quicksand.
This earthquake would last 4 minutes or more, the rattling and the shaking, and then within 15 minutes they estimate this wall of water. In the entire inundation zone, you could have water up to 100 feet high.
That's right. And in the inundation zone, we have 70,000 people that have almost no clue as to what could happen. That's right. Mount Everest is also created by the collision of two faults, just like what we have here. The one fault going under, the other fault going over, and that created the Himalayan mountains. That created Mount Everest. That's the power packed by the subduction zone earthquake. That's right. And, you know, within the lifetime of some of our viewers, they may see Seattle and Portland destroyed.
Now what's going on is we have this evergreen tremor. It's a simulation that the military is conducting here with over 1,000 troops, and they're also pulling in officers from Oregon and Idaho, saying that this will be preparations for a massive military relief effort. Now, one of the primary areas of focus here is travel, because they're not going to be able to travel by ground, they say. There's going to be pockets that are going to be impassable, and they're going to have to learn to get around this. Here, you're seeing chopper activity in this neck of the woods. We've also seen the military activity in Montana. We've seen it all across Alaska. And now you have this here in Washington State. So they're preparing for the big one, a tsunami. And as he just stated, if this was to ever happen, 50 to 80,000 troops called up. So you see, one big event like this could occupy all of our troops, all of our National Guard from every state pulled in to try to help this. And that leaves you vulnerable to anything else that comes along.
I was in a vision, an open vision. And again, I thought I was dreaming. As I watched, there was a weather broadcast that was on television. Ladies and gentlemen, another tragedy has hit America. He said, right in the heartland of America, on the New Madrid Fault, a major earthquake has just hit, and immediately pictures of devastation began to pop up all over America, the heartland of America, along the New Madrid Fault, as earthquakes cause entire cities to crumble. And while I was sitting there, I heard a booming voice in behind my ear that said, "They have divided my land, now I will divide their land."
And Leviticus says that Israel is God's land. He actually says, "This is my land."
Mm-hmm. And the Word of God goes on to prophesy in Joel, I believe it is, that if we divide His land, that God will divide our land.
Now, what will be the aftermath of dividing Jerusalem? It will be divided. What will be the aftermath? Great earthquakes will take place in many places around the world, especially in the nations that will be involved in creating, conniving this plan to divide Jerusalem. It will be followed by great tidal waves of tsunami coming to cause great devastation. You know, when these words were spoken prior to the prophetic conference that we conducted in Egypt near Mount Sinai last December, I was fasting for 3 days up on the mountain prior to the conference. And one morning, I was sitting by a rock, sipping a cup of tea and meditating the Word of God, and suddenly I saw an open vision right before my eyes. I saw a mighty angel with a long drawn sword in his hand, and he stood before me speaking all these words, and then he said, "This is what will happen to the best friend that will betray Israel and divide Jerusalem." When he spoke those words, I saw this map of US, like in a three-dimensional, It appeared right before my eyes, beside the angel, and he took the sword and pierced right into the heart of US and cut into two. He said, "Likewise will this nation be divided, as Jerusalem will be divided." Cut the land into two.
So I knew then that the Lord was showing me
that it was a New Madrid fault erupting. That thing was bucking so hard, that building was bucking so hard, I'm 6'3", and it was throwing me around like a rag doll, and my teeth, I couldn't keep my teeth from clapping in the dream. And when I woke up, I mean, for me to be shaking like that, that had to be a God dream. It was not a regular dream.
Sure.
Right.
So I believe, this is what I personally believe. I can't prove this. It's just supposition. I believe that it may be possible that that's on hold in the event that America mishandles Jerusalem. If the Secretary of State, whoever that may be in the future, or if the President in the future pressures Israel to divide Jerusalem, and we have a hand in it, I believe the New Madrid is going to bust wide open and divide America. That's what I believe. It's a dangerous thing to be elected President of the United States for one reason. How are you going to handle Israel and how are you going to handle Jerusalem?
Yeah.
Makes no difference how you handle Paris.
Right.
Makes no difference how you handle Rio.
Right.
Makes no difference how you handle South Africa.
Yes.
Makes no difference how you handle Iraq.
Right.
But how a president and the Secretary of State handles Israel and Jerusalem can have major ramifications on that man and this nation. So we've got to make sure whoever we elect president is going to be a friend to Israel and will be a friend of Jerusalem. Got to make sure.
And the world is focused on Israel right now. The armies have surrounded Jerusalem. We're living in this hour. And, you know, after you prophesied these things, we research here. We have my students research. October 30th, 1991, George Bush opened the Madrid conference. Isn't it amazing? The name was Madrid. And aimed at forcing Israel to give up more land. And at that same time, a storm, 35-foot high wave hit his home.
That's Bush number one.
That's and Bush's New England home. Then August 23rd, 1992, was you referring to it, the Madrid conference moved to Washington, D.C., and that same day, Hurricane Andrew, the worst natural disaster in U.S. history at the time, caused $30 billion in damage, left 180,000 people homeless. And then it goes on. Then President Clinton met with Syria's president for talks on forcing Israel to give up the Golan Heights. Less than 24 hours later, a 6.9 earthquake shook Southern California, second most destructive natural disaster to hit the U.S. And it goes on and on. And 1997, March 1st. And then tornadoes devastated America on these same days.
Sunday morning, and I told him, I said, anytime we've mishandled Israel, it cost us. And I said, I'm in fear of what's about to happen. And that afternoon, the tornado struck Joplin, Missouri. That was within 2 days after President Obama said that Israel's got to give back the land they got. They need to go back to the old boundaries. And it struck Joplin.
These are 10 events that I don't have time to share with you today. But the big one was when President George Bush pressured Israel to evacuate the Gaza Strip. 8,000 Israeli settlers were forced to leave their homes. Exactly 1 week later, Hurricane Katrina smashed Louisiana. 80% of the city of New Orleans was under water. And the percentage of the Israeli population that was made homeless by the forced evacuation was almost equal to the same percentage of the American population left homeless by Katrina. This is prophetic.
But what the Holy See did, also known as Vatican, they signed a State of Palestine global agreement. Don't you love the
global,
wording?
Yeah.
Don't you love the wording? What does global remind you of? You tell the viewers.
New World Order.
New World Order.
Yes, New World Order, yes.
Dear Lord. That's like, it includes a one world government, one world religion, and a one world monetary system.
Wow.
Representatives of the Holy See and the State of Palestine signed a global agreement in the Vatican on Friday, just today, again, moments before the same-sex marriage, gay marriage ruling, overriding God's law passed today in the United States of America. This global agreement between the Vatican and Palestinian Authority, they call it essential for the aspects of the life and activity of the church. When the purpose of this global agreement is to literally say the Vatican, they're saying we the Vatican, we recognize the Palestinian Authority not just no longer like as a people trying to vie for a state, we recognize you as a state. What that means is that the Vatican says not only do we recognize Palestinian Authority as the state of Palestine, but we also recognize that Jerusalem must be divided in a two-state solution as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So make no mistake about it, this global agreement means that the Vatican is representing nations of the world. They're representing the UN in this recognition of the state of Palestine.
Barack Obama has congratulated Benjamin Netanyahu after his victory in the Israeli election. In the phone call, he emphasized the deep ties between the two countries. The message was not all rosy, though. Washington is now hinting it may withdraw its support for Israel at the United Nations over the issue of Palestine and the Iran nuclear deal.
Shalom Chavrim, I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live. Very, very disturbing article by Giulio Meotti. Writing on Israel National News tonight about what's happening to the Jews in Jerusalem. He is clearly showing, as we have brought out as well, that the city is going to be divided. They are going to take and force the Jews out of the city. It's our latest news that has just come out. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live. You see there, even in the photos here, you're seeing how what they're doing is they're going to take and internationalize Jerusalem. On Highway 1 that comes up from Tel Aviv, they're putting these giant arches up on the highway there, and you see the harness wires coming out where there'll be another guard checkpoint. The tunnels, they're not under a mountain. The mountains are off to each side, but yet they're making a checkpoint. Now, for those of you that have never been to Israel, you may not quite understand why this is alarming to me. But the reason it's alarming is because Tel Aviv to Jerusalem has always been Israel. I mean, 1948, no, but since 1967, when Israel recaptured back the land that God had given Israel, that became Israel. And so there was no need for a checkpoint. So if they're putting a checkpoint in, it's not coming from the West Bank. Obviously, the Jews that are living in Tel Aviv are going to have to go through a checkpoint, which clearly shows that either they're going to give Jerusalem to the Palestinians, or it's going to become an international city under Palestinian control, which clearly in Micah chapter 4, down there near around verse 10 or so, it says that they will be taken out of the city and will dwell in the fields. So it is a biblical prophecy that the Jews will be uprooted from Jerusalem. And I'm just concerned because I know it's prophecy. I know Israel is going to be divided according to prophecy of Joel chapter 3, verses 1, 2, and 3. I know this is all prophetic. It's going to happen, but I will be a voice to speak against it. And because the Jewish people, we have a right to our own homeland, and we know it's going to happen. But remember, even though they divide the land, then God will bring all the nations down. Because right now, Brother Begley was telling me 136 nations have already agreed to sign on for the two-state solution. So when it goes before the UN Council for the resolution, well, huge majority, and the 5 voting members, 4 have already stated they will not veto it whatsoever. President Barack Obama is not saying anything, but clearly he said just recently that he would not veto it either. So that's going to pass. It's going to force Israel to a point that they will have to either do it or what? That mark of the beast. You can't buy or sell, saving you take that mark. He's going to put it on Israel. And those that have made a confederacy with him have lifted up their head. And the Pope of Rome is that head that they've lifted up. And you wonder about the deadly wound and being healed. Have you ever thought about the fact that when the Vatican first began many, many years ago, 325 AD, finally after so many hundreds of years there, then the Vatican was nearly destroyed. Nearly totally wiped out, almost completely obliterated. But then they came back. They finally came back, and when they did, they got strong again. Now, why would I call that a head wound? Because why? The Vatican believes that they're the head of both political, temporal power, and spiritual power. They consider themselves the head. They consider themselves the leader, the authority of the entire world. All right, so when the Vatican the Catholic Church nearly died, the head, the leading church, the church that birthed out all the other denominations, it nearly died. The head was wounded. But it came back. And they have come back from the dead, so to speak, and they've risen to power. And they're and by the way, too, this is why you see the Romans getting more and more control in Israel. Why? Because when Yeshua was here 2,000 years ago, don't forget, when Yeshua was here 2,000 years ago, the Romans were in control. Even the apostles, they wanted to be delivered from the hands of the Romans. Did they not? That's exactly what they wanted. Deliver us from the hands of the Romans. But then when he died, they were very disappointed because they thought that he'd come to deliver them. Well, you know, he read Isaiah 61, verse 1 and verse 2, only half of verse 2, where he came for the acceptable year to set the captives free. He did exactly that. But you know what? The other half of verse 2 is to bring judgment. It's to bring that vengeance and everything. So see, in verse 1 and first half of verse 2, he was only coming as the peacemaker. That was Christ then. See, but now he comes for vengeance. What? Rome has to get back in control again. That's why you see this move. And when Rome is in control again, Yeshua returns, and this time he will deliver the Jews from the hands of the Romans. So the stage has to be reset. And now the Pope, the Antichristo, he's trying to pretend like he's the Prince of Peace now of Isaiah 9:6. He's the Counselor, Prince of Peace, the mighty God, the everlasting Father. He's trying to be that one. And he's trying to act out Isaiah 61, but it's not going to work. It is not. Watch what you're seeing. Look as you're going. They're trying to internationalize Jerusalem.
We have troops in California training for a mass casualty simulation. This time, this is taking place at the 29 Palms facility. Now, what this is the Marine Corps in their Air-Ground Combat Center of 29 Palms hosting this training exercise that they call 2015 Integrated Training Exercise 4-15. And they're saying that their primary mission is not only to train but to provide medical care for anyone wounded or that goes down along the way. We have hundreds of troops showing up in Ocala, Florida, where a lot of people have been sending me links and information to what they're seeing with all these military vehicles. They said that this is necessary to hone in their skills in the event of a terrorist attack or natural disaster. And they also go on to say, as an update in the story down here, they were questioned, does this have anything to do with Jade Helm? And they said no, that this is their own operation, training exercise that they have going down, and that this will consist of 600 to 700 military personnel. So that right there is half to more than half of the troops that were supposed to be a part of Jade Helm alone. They have occupied a school. They are at Westport High School in their parking lot. It's currently filled with military vehicles, and they're going to be running these exercises in this area. An update to Operation Jade Helm. It looks like now it's extending pretty much coast to coast. As I stated in the last video, they added Florida as well as Mississippi, but now we have confirmation from this link talking about the operation itself, including Mississippi and Louisiana. In Florida, that's going to end on September 11th. Now, this is planned to go till September 15th, but for some reason in Florida, they're going to end it on September 11th. Yeah, pretty much state to state, this is connected coast to coast now. So, massive event growing larger, and I'm going to keep an eye on places like Arkansas, Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma. I've heard reports in the Carolinas of some activity going down too by the Appalachian Trails.
Why are the Jewish people in Israel today? Is it random? Is it a coincidence? Or is it destiny? What's happening in Israel today is the culmination of Jewish history. For almost 4,000 years, the Jewish people have been living on faith. Faith in prophecies given thousands of years ago. Promises that seem irrational, promises that seem almost impossible. Every prophecy dependent on the next. If one isn't true, none of them are true. Every single one of them is coming to pass in our lifetime. Every single one of them.
No one has suffered as we have suffered. No one has been this persecuted.
Anti-Semitism, the oldest, most universal, intense, irrational hatred in the world.
If it was pogroms, crusades, the Inquisition, Muslim oppression, nation after nation, religion after religion.
And the persecution we faced has always transcended all logic and rational thought. When we were poor and destitute in the shtetl, we were hated for being parasites. When wealthy, for being money grubbing. One thing that we could always rely on is that there would always be a reason, a pretext to hate us.
The ingathering of the exiles, it's the most prophesied event in the Bible. It's mentioned over 40 times. Unprecedented in history. Never before has a nation been scattered across the world and then ingathered to its ancient homeland. And yet every single prophet mentions this miraculous feat that will happen. Behold, I will bring them from the land of the north and gather them from the ends of the earth. Among them will be the blind and the lame, the pregnant and the birthing together. A great congregation will return here.
Now, after the most inspiring comeback story in world history, after building the most moral and innovative democracy in the entire Middle East, you'd think that Israel would be supported and held up as an example. But we see that the UN, a representation of all the nations in the world, condemn Israel far more than any other country on the planet. And I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle.
The only country in the world that it's being called, its destruction is being called for by a member state of the United Nations. That its national movement, Zionism, was declared racist and illegal by the United Nations. That its capital city, which is arguably the oldest capital of any country in the world, is not recognized by any country. And there's many, many more points. Israel was founded 3 years after the Holocaust. 3 years after 70% of the Jews were destroyed in what is exponentially the largest slaughter of any people in human history, the remnant trickled back against the will of the British, okay, with no support from the world, into a desert piece of real estate with no natural resources, no infrastructure, surrounded by millions of hostile Arabs in a constant state of warfare, terrorism, economic blockade. And think about it, within a few years, the desert is exporting fruits and vegetables to the rest of the world. That Israel is the only country in the world that has more trees at the end of the 20th century than the beginning. In terms of high-tech per capita, the most in the world is in Israel, done in less than 40 years, with no natural resources, constant war, terrorism, economic blockade. It's unbelievable, but people just don't see it because we've gotten used to it. It's Jewish history. It's all supernatural.
We were given these visions and promises thousands of years ago for our time and for our generation. Every single promise has come to pass.
And these occurrences. And I want to go over just a couple of the things that have happened because it's only happened in 3 times.
3 times in over 500 years.
In 500 years.
And this is confirmed by NASA. This is not something that a religious think tank put together. This is something that you can check on the internet. This is what NASA says has happened, and this is what they say is going to happen. The irony of what it takes to get the sun, the earth, and the moon in a perfect alignment, to have a blood moon, and then for those blood moons to be on this exact date is something that just is beyond coincidental. The Bible very clearly says, Joel, the 2nd chapter, says the day of the Lord will be as when the sun refuses to shine. The significant thing is that between these 4 blood moons will be a total solar eclipse, and the moon will be turned to blood. That is exactly repeated in Acts, the 2nd chapter. It is repeated by Jesus Christ in the book of Luke, the 21st chapter, when he said, you will see the sun, signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars. And when you see these signs, lift up your head, your redemption draweth nigh. I have researched this backwards and forwards, and the concept that these 4 blood moons happen on a high holiday 4 times in a row with a solar eclipse in the middle is beyond the null hypothesis of probability. This is something that the Bible, using the sun, the moon, and the stars as a communication system to humanity, says something is about to change and world history is going to change forever.
Buried in the library of the Vatican was an ancient 900-year-old prophecy which listed every pope for the next 112 popes. Well, we've had 111, And every single pope that had a prophetic word, and they all had it, that's what happened in their life. Amazing, stunning accuracy. Would you like to know what it says about the 112th Pope? I'll tell you one thing. It says he will be the Pope for the final judgment.